All right, welcome to Daf Yomi. Daf Yomi sponsored this week by Rabbi Aaron and Evelyn Kislasi in honor of the upcoming marriage of their daughter Ilana to Joy Brescher of Los Angeles in Misham Thursday night.
Yeah.
It's coming up. Yud Amid Aleph. We are at the two dots in the middle of the page. If you see where Tosfos Vehatanya, the third Tosfos, right? It's like right next to there. It says the word V'yom Genusya Shel Malcheim. We're going to talk about the day of the Genusya of their kings, and the Gemara wants to know, my V'yom Genusya Shel Malcheim. What is the Yom Genusya? So Amar Rav Yehuda, Yehuda says, Yom Shemamidim Bo Ovdi Kochav Mes Malkam. It's the day of coronation of the kings. Of the Ovdei Kochavim, the non-Jewish kings. V'atayim, we learn another brisa says Yom Genusya v'Yom Shemamidim Bos Malcham, that it's forbidden to do business on the Genusya day and the day that they established their kings. So it sounds like those are two different days. Lo kasha, not a contradiction. Hadidei hadibrei. There's his coronation, and then when the king is still alive and he established and he passes on the reign to his son. So that's another coronation day. Umi mukmi malka bar malka, but the Romans don't do that. The Romans don't pass the kingship to their sons. They would pass it along. The Senate would have a vote, or however it would work. The emperor would not necessarily get passed to their child.
But you think the king's son is a prince, we think if the king dies, we think the prince would take over.
It depends on which government you are, right? They don't do that in the United States or Canada, and they did do it in Rome. Okay. V'hatani, Rav Yosef learned, V'hinei, katon nisaticha bagoyim, I have made you the minor nation, a least amongst the nations. Why is Rome called that? She'ein moshivin melech ben melech, because they don't have dynasties. They don't have the lineage being passed down from one generation to the next. Bozo yata me'od, and then another pasuk says, continuing that pasuk, that you are debased very much. She'ein lahen lo ksav v'lo lashon. The Romans didn't have their own language, and they don't have their own writing. They adopted language and writing from other nations that they conquered. So I guess Latin or whatever didn't originally come from them. Didn't come from the Romans, but I guess it came from others before. I didn't look up whether that is historically known or not.
Italian as well.
Yeah, well, Italian is not Roman, right? Italian derives from Latin. There are a lot of languages that derive from Latin. Italian derives from it, but it's not Latin. Latin is the Roman language, right? Ela ma Yom Genusya. So what is Yom Genusya then? If it's not the coronation day and it's not the son's coronation day, because there isn't the son's coronation, Yom Haleida, it's the birthday, king's birthday. V'atanya, but we're going to brisa Yom Genusya v'Yom Haleida. Another brisa says on the day of Genusya and his birthday. So we see they're not the same thing. Lo kasha, hadidei hadibrei. One is his birthday, one is his son's birthday. V'atanya, but we're going to brisa Yom Genusya shelo, Yom Genusya shel bno, whether it's the Yom Genusya of him, or the Yom Genusya of his son, the Yom Haleida shelo, or the Yom Haleida shel bno, or his birthday or his son's birthday. So that seems clearly to indicate that it is, Yom Genusya is not the same thing as a birthday. Ella, my Yom Genusya. So we're still looking for an identification of what this Yom Genusya is. Yom Shemamidim Bo Malkam. So it's the day that they set up their king. Below Kasha, and we said it wasn't, how could you establish this the day they set up their king? We had a brisa before that indicated that Yom Genusya and the day they set up their king were two different days. Hadidei hadibrei, one is his and one is his son. V'kashilach, and if you're going to ask the question which we had asked before, de lo mokmi malka bar malka, that they don't have the son of the king become the next king, al yedei she'ela mokmi, they could ask for that. Meaning, if the king wanted to ask the Senate to please make my son be the next king, he could nominate his son for that position. And then if his son would have been given that position, so then that's how the brisa says that there's his Yom Genusya and then his establishment of his son as the next king.
Would they have a meeting between the Senate?
They would have to. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what their rules, what the Senate procedures were for them. And I'm sure it varied different times in the, various Roman emperors had various relationships with the Senate, but they seem to have been able to nominate their son if necessary. So Kogon, for example, Asvirus bar Antoninus. For example, Asvirus, the son of Antoninus. De Malach, he became king, even though his father Antoninus was also the king. Amarle Antoninus le Rebbe. Antoninus said to Rebbe once, Ba'inadim loch Asvirus bar bri tach tochosi. I really want my son Antoninus to take over after me, Asvirus to take over after me. Vetis avid Tiveria Kolonia. The other thing I want is I would like Tiveria to become a tax-free city, because that's where the rabbis lived, and I think it would be good to respect the rabbis and not and take taxes off of the city of Tiveria. So v'imeluhu chada avdi trei lo avdi, but I know that if I go to the Senate and I ask them to do one of those two things, they'll give it to me. But I don't have enough power to be able to ask for both of those things. So therefore, what should I do?
Take away the taxes.
So I see Gavra Arkave Achavre. So what Rebbe did is he got a guy and he put him on the shoulders of another guy. V'yavle Yona Leiloi, and he put a dove in the hands of the upper guy. Biyadeh in his hand. V'amar le l'tata, and he said to the guy down below, Amar le'ela de lemifrach min yadei Yona. Tell the guy who's up above you to let go of the bird. So Amar shmamina hachi kamarli. So Antoninus figured out the message that Rabbi was sending him. He said, "This is what he's telling me." Ad boy minayu das virus bri yimloch tachosi. So he says, what you should do is make your son Asvirus the king. Ask for that. Ve'emalei lasvirus de ta'aved Tiveria klanya, and tell Asvirus that when he becomes king, he should make Tiveria tax-free. Right? That's the whole thing, right? You're the guy on the bottom, put somebody on the top, the guy on the bottom tells the guy on the top to let the dove go.
At least Stefanski had 2 bachrim pull a shtick.
Shouldn't you do it? Okay. I have to get some bachrim.
We'll make a note of that one.
Next time through, I need shtick. Amar le, mitzaran li chashuve romoi. So he says, so another time, Antoninus was talking to Rebbe, and he said, the Roman people, there are these guys that are really starting up with me, and the Roman nobles. So what do I do? So, Maya le legina, so they went walking through the garden. Kol yoma, every day they went, Akar le pugla mimashra kame. He pulled up a radish from the garden. Rebbe pulled up a radish from the garden. Amar, so Antoninus said, I know what's going on. Shmamina, hachi kamarli. This is what he's telling me. At kitol chad minayu. Kill them all one at a time, right? Don't go after the whole group all at once. Pluck them out one at a time. Velo tiskari behu bekulhu. Don't start up because if you start all of them up at once, then they'll all get together and fight back against you. You pluck them one at a time. Yud Amid Base. V'lemelei Meimar Behedya. Why is Rebbe always talking in code and making the shtick, right? Like Rebbe Stefanski does. Why doesn't he just say it outright? So Amar Shim'i Chashuve Romi Umitzarule. He said, because the Roman authorities will overhear my advice and then they'll come after me, right? I don't want that. V'lemelei Belachash. Why doesn't he whisper? Right? So whisper. So Mishum Diksiv, because the pasuk says, Ki Of Hashemayim Yolich Es HaKol. The birdie in the heavens will help transfer the voice, right? As they say, little birdie told me, right? So therefore, he said, I'm not going to whisper it. I'm just going to hint it. And he figured it out. And that's how it works. He told me in code. Havalehu Barsa Shmei Gira. So Antoninus had a daughter named Gira. Avodah Isura. She went and had a illegal relationship. And so Shadar Lei, so he sent Rebbe a gargira. That is, a gargira is called a rocket, which is a type of a vegetable. I don't know what that looks like, but
vegetable.
Rocket vegetable. Shadar le kusbarta. So he sent back a kusbarta, which is a coriander. Now a gargira, it's code, right? Her name was Gira. Gargira means that his daughter Gira has gone astray. So he sent back a coriander kusbarta. Barta is daughter. Barta, kill your daughter.
Rabbi, it's like another name for arugula.
An arugula? Okay, there you go. Rocket is arugula. There you go. So if you sent him an arugula, I don't know if that would have made the same, right? Shadar le karti. So he sent back leeks. Right? Why leeks? Because karti means I'll be cut off, meaning that's my daughter. That's my only lineage. Then what am I supposed to do? Shalach le chasa. So he sent him some lettuce. Chas means to have mercy. Right? So he sent them chasa so he could have some mercy. So therefore they had this code. They sent back forth. Kol yoma havashadar le dahava pricha bimatarasa vechiti apumaihu. So what Antoninus used to do is he would send Rebbe gold in a bag, and then he'd put some wheat on the top of the bag. So if you open the bag, all you'd see was wheat. You wouldn't see the gold underneath. So Amar Lahu, Tiv Chiti Rebbe, and he would say, go bring this wheat over to Rebbe. Amar le Rebbe said to him, Lo tzarichna, isli tuva, I don't need your gold. I've got plenty of money. I'm very well off, and I don't need it. Thanks. Amar lihavu leman de basrach, diyahavi libasrai. He says, what you have to give it to the ones who come after you and the ones who come after them, meaning it's for your kids and your grandkids. Da asu basrach, that are going to come after you. Uda asu minaihu, and anybody who comes out from you, because nefak alaihu. So, because what's going to happen is you're going to have to pay my descendants, right? Eventually, my descendants may not be as nice as me, and they'll have to force you to pay taxes. So I'm paying your taxes for you in advance, right? So you'll take this money, and then you'll use it to pay back the taxes that your descendants will pay back the taxes that my descendants will charge. Havale hahi nakrasa dahava ayla mi beise lebase Rebbe. So he had this tunnel. Right, that's what he had. Right, he had a tunnel that would connect from his house to Rebbe's house. Okay, Kol Yom Ahava Maisi Trey Avdi. So he didn't want to go alone, right? So he'd have to bring his two slaves with him. Chad Katle Abava Debe Rebbe, and then when you get to Rebbe's house, he'd kill one of them, right? Vechad Katle Abava Debe, and he killed the other one when he got back home on the other side, right? That way, nobody would know that he was secretly visiting Rebbe. Right, I think it was Tosfos points out that these were usually there were people who had committed some sort of crime that they were guilty in the first place. Right, he wasn't just killing innocent people to do that. Amarle beidno de asino lo nishkach gavar kamach. He told Rebbe, when I come, there shouldn't be anybody in the room with us. Right, I don't want anybody to know. Yom echad ashkechel Rabbi Chanina bar Chama dava Yosef. So one day he walks in and there's Rabbi Chanina bar Chama sitting there in Rebbe's room. Amar lo aminalach ba'idna de asina lo nishkach gavar kamach. Didn't I tell you you're not supposed to have anybody here? Amar le leis dein bar inish. It's not a human being. This Rabbi Chanina bar Chama. He's an angel. So Amar le. Emele lahu avda degani abava dekaim v'lesi. So he says, okay, fine. Why don't you go tell the guard that's by the door to come on inside? Now he killed that guy, right? So the guy's dead. So he's testing to be able to see, well, if he's really, that's supernatural or is he not? So Azar Rabbi Chanina bar Chama. So Rabbi Chanina bar Chama went outside. Ashkechi dahava katil. He saw that he was dead. Amar hechi ovid. What am I supposed to do now? If I go back and I tell him he's dead, I'm not supposed to return bad news, right? That's a bad, dishonorable thing to return bad news. We see that in the Megillah, that when Mordechai sends somebody to go tell Esther, and Esther says, no, thank you, right? He doesn't go back himself. He sends somebody else to go tell Mordechai because he doesn't want to go back and tell the bad news. Ashav K, what should I do? Just leave him there and I'll just walk off? That's going to be disrespectful to the king because he told me to do something. I'm not listening. So he dove into Hashem, and he brought him back to life. Veshadre, right, sent him back in. So Amar Yadana Zuti Isbechum Mechayim Mesim. He says, okay, I realize that the least amongst you can bring the dead back to life. Mihu, however, nobody should be here when I come. So I'm change my mind, okay? From now on, nobody's here. He used to serve Rebbe, right? He used to respect Rebbe so much he would serve him food and drink. Yes, he would. And kihava boy Rebbe lemesak lepurya, when Rebbe would need to climb up into his bed, hava gochin kame purya, he would get on his hands and knees in front of the bed so that he would step on him in order to get up into bed. Amrle sak ilavai lepuryach, step on me in order to get up into bed. Amar lav orach ara l'zazuli b'machus. I can't embarrass the king. You understand? You're the king of Rome. I can't step on you. So kuleha, it's not right. All this. So Amar mi yisimenu meitza tachtecha l'olam haba. He says, I just want to be the mat underneath your feet in olam haba. I should just be that. So Amar le asina li almadas. He says, you're going to bring me to olam haba. So Amar le in. He says, yeah. Rebbe says, you're going to go to olam haba. Amar le. He says, but I know. V'aksiv, the pasuk says, lo yesrid lebeis Esav. So he says there won't be any remnant to Esav in the world to come. So therefore, I can't get into Olam Haba. So he says, "Ba'osa masa Esav." That's only if somebody who acts like people from Esav, right? It's not inherent. It's not genetic. That's the problem. It's an action that's the problem. And you're a good person, so you'll go to Olam Haba. Tanya Nami Hachi, we have a brisa that supports that statement. Lo hayasrid leveis Esav. There are no remnants to the house of Esav. Yachol lakol. You might think that applies to everybody. Talmud lomar lebeis Esav, to the house of Esav, meaning ba'osa masa Esav, only if you are acting like the household of Esav. Amar lei b'haksiv. He said back to him, but the pasuk says, Shama Edom Malcheha v'chol Nisieha. So he says there is Edom, its kings, and all of its rulers, all of its leaders. Right? They're going to go not to Olam Haba. They're going to go to the other place. So Amarlei Malcheha v'lo kol Malcheha. He says, yeah, the kings, but not all the kings. Many of the kings of Esav, you're right, are not going to the right place. Kol Nisieha, and then it says all of the leaders. But not all of the officers, right? The princes, you're right, but not all of the officers. Tanya Nami Hachi, we have a brisa that supports this. Malcha v'lo kol malcheha, says explicitly, some of the kings, not all of the kings. Kol nesiyah v'lo kol sareha, all of the princes, but not all of the officers, right? So sometimes you can have somebody from Esav who can go to Olam Haba. Malcheha v'lo kol malcheha, prat lantaninus ben asvirus. So, for example, what kind of a king was able to make it to Olam Haba? Antoninus ben Asvirus, right? So Asvirus was also his son, so it was named after his grandfather. So Antoninus ben Asvirus, kol nesieha velo kol sareha, and also all of the nesiim, but not all of the officers. Prat l'ketia bar shalom, that excludes ketia bar shalom. What happened with ketia bar shalom? Ketia bar shalom, mai, who's ketia bar shalom? Dahu Kisra, the Hava Sani Lehudai. There was once a Caesar who really hated the Jews. Amar lehu lechashivi demachusa. He said to the important people in the kingdom, Misha ololo nima beraglo yaktiana. If we've got some kind of a wart or sore on our foot, what's the right thing to do? Should we cut it off, v'yichya, and then we'll be able to, it'll heal?
The cream on it.
Oh, no, that wasn't the option. Oh, yeah, nicheno v'yitzar, we're going to leave it alone and let it be painful, right? So we've got it clear, we just got to cut it off. Amar lo yaktiana v'yichya. We got to cut it off and then it'll heal. Amar lo Ketia bar Shalom. So Ketia bar Shalom speaks up and he says, Chada, I've got two things that's wrong with that. Number one, Delo Yachalt Lahu, you're not going to be able to get all the Jews. Why? Because the pasuk says, Ki ka'arba ruchos hashamayim pirashti eschem. I spread the Jews up amongst all the four winds, all the four directions. Now, my Ka'amar, what does this mean? Ilema dibadaros hon bedalad ruchos. If it means that he spread them in all four directions, hi ke'arba ruchos, le'arba ruchos mibayah. The pasuk should have said, not he spread them like the four wings, but he spread them to the four winds, to the four directions. Ella, so rather, kishem she'iyav shalom below ruchos, rather it means is, the Jews are like the four winds. Just like the four winds, the world can't exist without the four winds. Kach iyav shalom below Yisrael. It's impossible for the world to exist without the Jews. Therefore, you can't eliminate Jews. They are part of the essential ecosystem of the world. And furthermore, second of all, they're going to call your kingdom that is cut off, because you're going to wind up with a whole nation that gets removed from your kingdom, and it'll be clear that there's some kind of missing or destructive piece within your empire. So that's no good. It's not a good thing. Samarle Meimer Shapir Kamart. He says, you're right. That was a fair answer. Mihu, however, called the Zachi Shadu le Kamunya. So he's Khalila. So he says, yeah, but the only thing is that everybody who wins and beats the king in an argument, he gets thrown into the circular chamber, right? They call it the circular chamber. So alternate explanations as to what the circular chamber was. Either it was some kind of chamber where they would bury the person alive, or it was a furnace where they would kill the person. So either way, it was a death sentence. So he says, right, so that's where we're going to send. That's where we're going to lekamonia chalila. He says the chamber with the ashes. He says here, which is either of those two explanations. So Amar lahu ketia bar shol. Sorry, skip. I went back. Kadhava naktin lay. When they would take him, when they were taking him away, the Uzlin, and he was going along, Amrullah he Matrinisa, one of the noble women of the court, said to him, Vai leilfa de Uzla below machsa. He says it's bad for for the ship that comes with that that's going without the tax, meaning that now you're going to go to Shemayim, you're going to go up there, but you are not Jewish and you haven't paid the way, so you're going to die, and then you're going to die for the Jews, and you're not even going to get in to Olam Haba. So Nafa al Reisha deur lasei kat ah. So he fell upon his orla and he gave himself a bris milah immediately. Now, whether that's a conversion, it doesn't make sense that it's conversion.
If non-Jew dies, it doesn't go to Shemayim. He's fought in midair. How does it work?
No, he goes on. We've had cases where non-Jews can go to Shemayim, right? We just had the case of Antoninus that he could go to Olam Haba, right? So he could, but there are Mefarshim that explain that Avram Avinu promised that he would help take anybody who has a bris milah out of Gehenna. So therefore, by jumping and taking care of that, even if he wasn't converting fully to Judaism,
into the furnace, whatever.
Sorry, he's being thrown. We
were thrown into the furnace.
No, two different things, right? One is Avraham Avinu, right? He is rescuing people who have a bris milah, and then we're talking about this fellow. What was his name? Katina Bar Shalom. Did I say his name right?
Katina Bar Shalom.
Yeah, Katia Bar Shalom, right? Exactly. So Katia Bar Shalom. So he wants to get a bris milah so that Avram Avinu will rescue him and take him into Shemayim. So Amar Yahavis Machzi Chalfis Ve'avris. He says, "Okay, I've paid my taxes, and now I'm heading off, ready to go to Shemayim." When they were throwing them, Amar Kol Nichsayir Rabbi Akiva v'Chaverov. He says, "I hereby bequeath all my possessions to Rabbi Akiva and his students." And the others. So Yatzer Rabbi Akiva, V'darash Rabbi Akiva explained. Now, what did he mean? Right? He said, Rabbi Akiva and the students, how are you going to divide this up? Is it divided equivalently? No. So he says, because the pasuk says, so it says that the lechem upon him was given to Aaron and his sons. Mechzel Aaron and Mechzel Levanov, which means that Aaron gets half and the sons get half. So therefore, Akiva V'chaverav, Akiva gets half and his friends get half, which is interesting because I would say like the other friends should get up and say, well, wait a second, you can't make that drasha, right? But apparently it was a fair drasha and everybody agreed to it. Yotzes Abaskol, a heavenly voice came out, V'amra, and it said, Katia Bar Shalom Mizuman L'chai Olam Haba, that Katia Bar Shalom made it into Olam Haba. Bacha Rebbe V'amar, Rebbe cried out and he said, Yesh Kona Olama B'sha'achas, there are some who can acquire their Olam Haba in one moment. V'yesh Kona Olama B'kama Shanim, and sometimes it takes people years. Antoninus, Shamshay L'Rebbe, so Antoninus we talked about, he was the one who served Rebbe. Adarkon, Shamshay L'Rav, Adarkon, who was a noble, non-Jewish noble, also had a similar relationship with Rav many years later. Kishchiv Antoninus, Amar Rav Nisparda Chavila. When Antoninus died, Rebbe said that the bundle is unraveled, meaning the close bond that we have is now opened, right? Because I don't have mine. Because Kishchiv Adarkon, when Adarkon died, Amar Rav said the same thing. Yud Aleph and Mid Aleph, Nisparda Chavila, the bundle is unraveled. Now let's talk about Onkelos. Onkelos bar Clonimus. Now, whether this is Onkelos, our Targum Onkelos, is a question. It could be that there are those who say that our Targum Onkelos lived a little bit before this, right? This is during the time of around the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash era. Onkelos, who wrote the Targum Onkelos, lived as a Tana a little bit earlier, but it's unclear. There are those who say one way versus the other way. So this is
that Onkelos was Onkelos for cleanliness?
That's the question, right? Question is whether this is the same Onkelos, right? And some say it's Unmiskar Klonikus, right? Whether it's Klonikus, which is what it says in the Gemara in Gittin. So it's not clear whether this is the same Onkelos that we have.
You get into the Masechtas Gittin to figure it out.
Well, as far as that name is concerned, but either way, whether this is Onkelos as our Targum Onkelos, just point out, not necessarily, right? It's an uncommon name. You don't see a lot of Onkeloses, but apparently, here he was. Onkelos, this fellow, Onkelos bar Clonimus, or Clonikus, was Igair, he converted. So Shadar Caesar Gunda de Ramaya Basrei. So the Caesar of Rome was upset about that because he was a noble person and he did not like that. So he sent Roman legions or whatever soldiers after him. Mashchinhu Bekroi Igor. So what happens is, Mashchinhu Bekroi. So Onkelos convinced them, right? He gave them all kinds of drushos of psukim, veigur, and they converted too. So the soldiers came, he talked to them, and they said, you know what, you're right, and they converted. Hadar Shadar Gunda Ramai. So then he sent another group, Achrina, another bunch of troops.
And they converted as well.
Abbas right after him. Amar Lu, but this time he told them, Lo Temru Le Velo Midi, don't talk to him, right? Talk to him, he's dangerous. Kihavu Shaklu Ve'ozlu, when they were taking him out, Amar Lahu, he said to them, Emalahu Milsa Bialma, Nipura Nakat Nura Kame Pipura. He says, the way that it works normally in the world is that the Nipura takes the torch in front of the Pipura, and the Pipura leduchsa, and the Pipura goes before the duchsa, and the duchsa lehegmona, and the duchsa goes before the hegmona, and the hegmona lekoma, and the hegmona goes before the koma, meaning these are all the lower officers go before the higher officers. The lower officer carries the torch in order to light the way for the higher officers. That's the way it works in Rome. Right? The upper people have no responsibility towards the lower people. That's the bottom line, right? This is going to be Onkelus's main line that keeps converting these people, right? He's explaining to them that the Roman philosophy is the higher up you are, the less you have to worry about the people below you. The people below you give you honor upwards, honor goes upwards, not the other way. But Kuma minakit nura makme inchi, the Kuma, the highest person, he doesn't have to carry a torch for anybody. So I'm relay. Lo Amar Lahu HaKadosh Baruch Hu Nakat Nura Kami Yisrael. He said, yeah, but you know what happened is Hashem, he lit the way for the Jewish people. Dichsiv, the pasuk says, Hashem holech lifneihem yomam. Hashem lit in the desert. He brought the cloud and the pillar of cloud, the pillar of fire, and he lit the way in order to draw the Jewish people. So you see that the way that it works in Judaism is that the leader takes care of the people. Right?
Hashem was our leader, and that's why he took care of it.
That's correct. So he says the higher up the leader is, even Hashem worries about the people. And he says that's why Rome has it backwards. So Igyur, so they converted. So that's a good point, right? Igyur Kulu, they all converted. Hadar Shadar Gunda Achrina Abasrei sent more soldiers after him. Amar Lui told them, Lo Tishtu Midi Bahadei, can't talk to him at all. Don't listen to anything he says, okay? Kinokdile va'azli, so they're taking him and they're going along. Chazam mezuzta demancha apischa. They saw a mezuzah on the door. Osif yadei, he kissed it, he put his hand on it. Maybe this is the source for it. He put his hand on the mezuzah. Amar and he said to them, my hi. He said, what is that? Amrulay, they said to him, Amalon, fine, tell us. Amalon Atmar, fine. You clearly tell us what is it? So Amar he says, Min hagol shel olam, the custom in the world is melech basar v'dam yoshem mibifnim. You put the king inside the house, v'avodav mishamrim osam b'chutz, and the guards stand outside protecting him. Right? The king is on; he's protected. The guys, everybody else stands outside protecting him. V'lo kadosh baruch hu, but not with Hashem. Avdav mibifim, his servants go inside. V'hu mishamrim b'chutz. He is here with his mezuzah, protecting everybody from the outside. Shnamar zeh Hashem yishmor tzeis chavach me'atav yad olam. Hashem guards you from your coming in, going out.
They converted.
Igur, they love that message. It's clearly a good message for the Romans. They did not like this idea that, you know what, we little people get taken advantage of a lot, right? It's not right. So this is clear. So two low shutter basra. See, they stopped sending more officers. After that, it's enough. It's enough.
Wow.
Okay. Vayom pasuk says, Vayomer Hashem law. Hashem told Rachel Imenu Shnei Goyim Bevitnech. There are two nations in you. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. Rabbi Yehuda said Rav. Al tikre Goyim el Geyim. Right. We don't say that they're called nations. They're not nations, but they are great ones. They are lofty, high ones. Who are they? Ze Antoninus v'Rebbe. We're talking about Antoninus and Rebbe. They were great people that came from Esav, great people that came from Yaakov. Shelo pasku me'al shulchanam, lo chazeres v'lo kishus v'lo tzno. They're so wealthy, right, that they did not have us, even when it wasn't in season. They always had on their table lettuce and cucumbers and radishes, right? Never stop.
Achashverosh's son was a great one. Achashverosh's son was a great one.
Achashverosh was Persian. So that's not going to count.
Right.
Okay. Lo mid mosa chama, not during the summer months. Lo bi mosa shamim, not during the winter months. Da amar mar tznon mechatech ochel. Right, a radish is good. It cuts the food up inside, helps the digestion. Chazeres mahapech ma'achal. Right, chazeres is roughage. Right, it's what do you call that? Fiber. It's good, right? It's that fiber, right? It's good for turning the food over inside. And kishus, these gourds or their squash or or cucumbers, marchiv me'ayim, they spread out the intestines. Good for digestion. V'hatana debei Rabbi Yishmael, but we ordered in the yeshiva Rabbi Yishmael. Lama nikra shman kishuin. Why are they called kishuin? Cucumbers. They're with kishuin. Mibnei shekashin legufo shel adam, because they're unhealthy. They're bad for you. So what is it? It's kecharavos. They're like swords. Lo kasha, not a contradiction. Beravavri ha bezutre. It depends if you eat big ones or small ones. I'm not quite sure which one is the bad one, right? Which is bad to eat, the big ones or the small ones?
The bad one. The regular is the good one.
Ravarvi, right? So he says the good ones are the big ones. No, the difficult bad ones are the big ones, right? Eat small cucumbers. Okay. Eat small cucumbers. At least if you cut it up. Chew your food. Yom haleida v'yom hamisa. Okay, then we said in the back into the Mishnah. Also the king's birthday and the day he dies. And then the Chachamim said that depends the day he dies. It depends if they burn his possessions or not. If they burn his possessions, then they're deifying the king. Okay, so now we called Rabbi Meir suffer. Rabbi Meir says it doesn't matter. Right, whether they burn his belongings, they don't burn his belongings. It's going to be a deification, and we're presuming there's a deification, and we cannot, it's considered a non-Jewish holiday. So loshna misa sheyesh basreifa, loshna misa she'ein basreifa, palchi ba lavodas kachavim. Right, they say it doesn't matter. He says that it doesn't matter if they burn anything or not. It's for idolatry. They're going to still say worship to their Avodah Zara. Al masreifa lav chazakahi, which means that the burning of possessions has nothing to do with idolatry, right? The idolatry comes from the fact that the king died. Has nothing to do with the burning. So whether they burn or they don't burn, doesn't matter. So any burning that takes place is not idolatry. However, Mikal the Rabbanon, that seems to imply that the rabbis say, no, everything depends on whether they burn or they don't burn. Savri, they must be holding that Sreifa Chukahi, that Sreifa is a non-Jewish custom, and that's a problem. V'hatanya, but we learned in a brisa, sorfen al hamalachim v'lo midarchei amori. We said we're allowed to burn for Jewish kings, and that's not considered to be a prohibition against following non-Jewish ways. Now, there's two different things. There's non-Jewish ways, which are prohibited to do, and then there are idolatrous customs, which are also prohibited. But they're two different prohibitions. This is saying, well, if it's a non-Jewish way, you still shouldn't be able to do it. V'chukahi anan heichi sarfinon. Now, if it's going to be considered some kind of idolatrous way, which is what we're suggesting potentially, how would they be allowed to burn for the sake of a Jewish king? The aksiv, doesn't the pasuk say v'chukoseichem lo telechu? You're not allowed to go in the non-Jewish ways. Ela dekul yama sreifa lav chukahi. So no, okay, sreifa, everyone agrees, is not a prohibited action. Ela chashivusahi. The burning is clearly just a statement of how important the king is. That's all it is. So even the Rabbanan who say it depends whether they burn him or they don't. They're burning his stuff, right? That's what we're saying. They're burning his belongings. That proves how important he was. They also, by the way, the non-Jewish kings they burned the bodies, right? But this was a burning of his possession in order to show how important he was. This is the argument. Doesn't matter if they burn the king's stuff or not. They're still going to do some kind of thanking for Avodah Zara in any event. For Rabbanan Savri, the Rabbanan hold no. Misa sheyesh basreifa. If they're burning his belongings, chashiva lahu, then the king is very important. Upalchi ba, and then they serve Avodah Zara. If she'ein basreifa, but if there's no burning that's taking place there, lo chashiva lo palchi ba, then it's not really that important to king, and therefore they're not thanking their Avodah Zara. Okay, Gufa, let's talk about this burning idea that they did even for Jewish kings. The Jewish kings even, they would burn the possessions of the Jewish kings, and it wasn't a violation of non-Jewish custom. Right? Shenamar, so we said it was only to show how chashuv the person was. That his belongings, once they were his, and nobody else should use his belongings afterwards, because it would be disrespectful for other people to take his things. Right? So the things that are his, nobody can use. That's the idea of it. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, B'shalom tamus u'b'misrafos avosecha hamlachim, that this is where was it Chizkiyahu that was promised, right? That he's going to die, and you're gonna have all of your things burned together just like with your father, right? So therefore, you're gonna to be able to indicate that that you're gonna have a proper burial. Let's see what it was.
I think it was
Tzidkio, that's what it was. Tzidkio, not Chizkio. Tzidkio, thank you. It's Tzidkio. Okay. Kashem shesorfim bo amlachim, shesorfim amlachim. Now, just like you can burn possessions for the kings, kach sorfim al nasiim, they also used to do it for the nasiim later on when there wasn't kings. The nasiim also they would do it for. Umahim sorfim al amlachim. What would they burn? What were the possessions that they would burn? Mitason, they would burn their beds. Uklei tashmishon, their regular possession, the regular utensils that they used all the time. Umaisa, and then there was a story. Shemeis Rabbi Gamliel Hazakin. There were Rabbi Gamliel Hazakin, the elder Rabbi Gamliel. There were three Rabbi Gamliels. The elder Rabbi Gamliel, who was the grandson of Hillel Hazakin, right? So he was. So Hillel, when Rabbi Gamliel Hazakin died, Svesaraf alav Unkelis Hager Shivim Mana Tsuri. This Unkelis Hager might have been the Unkelis, right? So Unkelis Hager, who lived earlier time, Rabbi Gamliel. So he burned 70 amounts of gold, which was a lot. Now, the problem is, you said, Mahin Surfim, what were they burning? They're only supposed to burn their bed and their belongings. Why did they burn a bunch of money? This doesn't seem necessary. Ema, so we should say, Beshivim Manatsuri, right? We mean to Umidia Manatsuri. Says what we did is they burned his belongings that were worth 70 Manatsuri. They didn't actually burn the money, because you're right. They only burned things that were actually him using. Umidia Achrini Lo. Now they didn't burn anything else. They used to hamstring the horse. Right, the horse that the king would ride on, so he would not be able to carry any other riders, and that is the prohibition of Darchei HaEmori. Right?
Where did these animal cruelty?
That's a great question. So the answer is we're going to see that there are parameters to how they used to do it, such that it would be done in such a way that would damage the horse, but would not violate animal cruelty rules. If it would be too much. Right, we're going to see there are circumstances where if they overly injured the animal, then it would cross into a problem of animal cruelty. Right, but if you we're going to learn in Chulin all the way the legs are and all the different parts of the animal and body, whatever. There are 3 bones in a leg of an animal. Right, they goes back this way. That's the tibia, the fibia, and then there's another leg bone. I cannot remember what it's called. It goes down again, and so I don't know whether it is. It's not the same thing because they have the. There's a bone called the humerus. Yes. So, but it's not because with a person we have 2 bones that are side by side here. Right, we're talking about this in the animal. It goes this way, this way. Anyway, it's the lower joint. You're hamstringing you're cutting the tendon by the lowest joint.
Right. We have illustrations for all that stuff.
Yes. It's between the shank bone and but it's called the hock between the shank bone and the lowest bone. Right. Okay. Is that what it is? Okay. Now, okay, so that's so Amarav, Rav Papa says, Sus Rachavav, they would do this for the horse that he would ride on. Ubehema Tahora Lo, but what they didn't do it for any kosher animals. Vatam we're in a brisa. Ikor sheyesh ba treifa usher. If they cut into the animal and the animal actually became a treifa as a result, that would be a more severe wound to the animal. That's where we get into the issue of causing the animal extreme pain. So that's not allowed. So now, v'shein ba treifa mutter, if it's not going to be a treifa, then that's acceptable. Now, ve'ezehu ikor she'ein ba treifa, how do you do it in order to make it so that it's not a treifa? Yud Aleph Amad Beis. Ha-menasher parso seha min ha'arkuva lamata. You got to do the bottom joint, right? From the bottom joint and below, from the hock, as they call it, from the bottom, with the tendon that links the bottom 2 parts of the leg. So that's what you have to do it. So tirgama rav pap. So therefore, the question is, if you have such a thing as a treifa, right? So then it must be a kosher animal beforehand, and now you've rendered it a treifa by cutting into the leg and wounding it so severely. That's so.
Treifa can only be from something those like a
not really. That's what bothers me because we've had circumstances we call a person a treifa also where he can't be chayav misa for it. But this seems to imply that the animal becomes a treifa, right? And that seems to imply that it's a kosher animal. So that was bothering me also because you do have non-kosher things like a human being could be called a treifa at times too, right?
But
Okay. So they explain that the answer is that they would have a calf that would pull a wagon, right? So he would have a calf that would pull a wagon. The king would have such a thing as well, and so that would be the animal that they would, because he wanted to make it so that it was an animal that was used by the king. So, and even kosher animals as well. So that's the circumstance. Okay, so we have kosher animals, we have non-kosher animals. Then the next one is a non-Jew Yom Tiglachas Zikno, the day he shaved his beard. So then we also had the day of his leaving of cutting his hair as well, right? To have his hair that he would cut, right? His mullet. So hey Tani, how are we supposed to learn this Mishnah? Yom Tiglachas Zikno v'hanachas bloriosov. So the thing is that what they would do is he would get a haircut, shave his beard, and then he would cut all of his hair, but leave a ponytail kind of a thing, or the hair in the back. That would be hanachas bluriosov. He didn't cut his beard and the back of his hair in the same day.
So he kept a bit of
So which is the day that we're talking about? The day he shaved his beard and left the long hair? Or was it the day that he cut his beard and removed the hair in the back? So Tashma, the Tani Tarvaihu Yom Tiglachas Ziknova Hanachas Bluriosov. So he says it's both of these things: the day that he would shave his beard and leave the hair in his back, and Yom Tiglachas Ziknova Avaras Bluriosov, and then later on when he was shaved and then cut the hair in the back as well. Those were both holiday moments for them. Amar Rabbi Huda Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Huda said in Shmuel, Od Acheres Yesh Lahem Baromi.
Those were holiday moments. Would that be like Avodah Zara?
That's right, correct. But only that person, as we said, only with that person on that day, right? Okay, next. Rav Yehuda says, Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Od Acheres Yesh Lahem Baromi. There's another Roman holiday that they had. Achas L'Shivim Shamna. Once every 70 years, Mevi'in Odom Sholem. They would take a person who was healthy, Umarkivin Oso Odom Chiger, and they would make him ride on a limping person. And this is symbolic because Esav was healthy, Yaakov had a limp because he got hit in the Gid HaNasha when he wrestled the Malach. So, Umal Bishan also Big Day Adam Harishon, they would put on the healthy person the garments of Adam Harishon, because we know that Esav killed Nimrod, and so therefore he would wear the garments of Adam Harishon. Umanichelo Barosho Kar Kiflo Shel Rabbi Yishmael, and then he would wear the mask. They would, when Rabbi Yishmael got killed in the Asari Harugi Malchus, they peeled his skin off his face, and they would put that mask on. V'talu le betzavara matkil dalad zuzah, and they would. This says reish, but it should be dalad zuzah, and they would hang on his neck a gem that was worth 4 zuz.
If it's supposed to be reish,
that would be 200 zuz. So it's either 200 zuz or 4 zuz, right? They change it to, it should be dalad. The pisa of this jewel. Umechapin es shvukim be'enach. Then they would put carbuncles, and I looked them up. They're very fancy jewels. I did look it up. If you look up carbuncle, first thing that comes up is a bunch of terrible sores on people's heads, because apparently that's called a carbuncle. And then if you look up carbuncle gem, then you'll see all kinds of very nice gems. Umachrizim lefanov, and they would call before him Sach Keri Plaster Achuha de Marana. Yes, that's it. Right, very fancy looking gems.
Beautiful.
That's the carbuncle, right? So they would call before him Sach Kiri Plaster Achua de Marana Zayafna. So they would say the calculation of this person, Yaakov Avinu, who said to his children that eventually the Jews are going to be redeemed, he's wrong, and he's a liar. Right, the brother of our master is a liar. Right, he's the liar. Dechami chame udelo chami lo chame. So anybody who sees this is going to be able to see it. But if you're not going to see it, you're never going to see it again, because we only do this celebration once every 70 years. So it's once in a lifetime event. So Mayahani l'rama b'ra'amusei u'lezayafna b'zayfnusei. So what was because they said that the exile, the Jewish exile, the first Jewish exile of Babylonia was only 70 years. So for every 70 years they would celebrate yet again. Yaakov's wrong again. See, another 70 years has gone by, and yet no redemption. And so they would say, look what he was able to accomplish by lying. But through lying, cheaters never win. Right? Umesaimin ba hachi, and then they went like this: Vailadein kad yakum dain. Then they would say, woe is to us when the other one gets up, meaning they knew that the prophecy was when one would be up, the other one would be down. So they said, okay, but one day we know Yaakov is going to be up and we'll be down, and that won't be so good. But right now, we're on top. Amar Ravashi, Hechshil Piyam L'Rashayim. Ravashi said, those wicked people, their own mouths have tripped them up. If they said that the liar is the brother of our master, so then that would be what they intended to say, right? That would be Yaakov is a liar. So now they said, the brother of our master, the liar, right? So therefore that comes out as their master is the liar. So marana gufei zaifna. That means the master Esav is the liar.
No. Yaakov's father-in-law was a liar as well.
Yes, right. But the issue is that these are the children of Rome, so that's why it's critical for us to point that out. Vetana didon, my time aloka chashiv la lahai. Why is it that our Mishnah doesn't include this holiday in the list? Deisa bekol shasa v'shasa kechashiv. The ones that are every year are on the list. Deleisa bekol shasa v'shasa lo kechashiv. This one is once every 70 years, so it doesn't get mentioned. Hani de romai ude parsai. My mutardi. What are the Persian holidays? So they are the Mutardi, Toriski, Moharanki, Moharan, Hani de Parsai. Those are the Persian holidays. Dudaramai, and the Roman holidays. De Bavloimai, what about the Babylonian holidays? Mehoranki, Va'aknisi, Bechenvani, V'asar Adar, right? These are all these different holidays, and also the 10th of Adar was their holiday. Amar Rav Chanan, they don't explain what occurred on any of those days. Amar Rav Chanan bar Rav Chizda, Amar Rav, Vamrila Amar Rav Chanan bar Rava, Amar Rav, Chamisha Bati Avodos Kachavim Kevu and Hain. There are 5 established idolatrous centers that they worship Avodah Zara every day. And so therefore, they do Avodah Zara every day. They're like the Avodah Zara factory, right? The minion factories, right? Yeah, Avodah Zara. They do that. Yes, they do it all the time. And you can never do business with them because they're doing Avodah Zara all the time. Elohein, base Baal beBavel, the base Baal in Bavel, base Nevo beKursi, Tarasa shebemapag, Tarasa and Mapag, Tzrifa be'ash be'ashkelon, Nashra bish shebe'aravia, right? Nashra, which is in Arabia. Ki also Rav Dimi, when Rav Dimi came from Israel, he said, Hosifu aleim, he said, also Yerid shebe'in Bechi, and Nidbecha shebe'ako, and Nidbecha is in Akko. So these are the places. Ikadamri, those say, is Nitbara shebe'ako, that is Nitbara, which not Nidbecha, but was Nitbara in Akko. Rav Dimi min Ardai, Masni Ibcha. Rav Dimi for Nardai had it backwards. Yerid was in Akko and Nidbecha was in Bechi. Amar Rav Chanan bar Rav Chista. Rav Chanan bar Rav Chista said to Rav Chista, is his father. My kevuin hain. What does that mean? That they are established. These are churches are established. Samarle hachi amar avua deimech. This is what your grandfather said on your mother's side. This is what he's basically told. He was talking to his son. So this is what your grandfather said on your mother's side. Kevuin hain li olam tadira kule shasa pavchi lahu. They are always worshiping Avodah Zara all the time. Therefore, you can't do any business with them ever. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel said begola eino aser ela yom edom bilvad. And outside of Eretz Yisrael, as we said, only the holiday itself is prohibited, not on, and Baruch Hashem, all those stores are closed on Christmas or whatever, so it doesn't matter, right? V'yom Eidon Nami mi asir, and even is it prohibited on the day of their holiday anyway? V'ha Rav Yehuda shara le Rav Brona lizvuni chamra ul Rav Gida lizvuni chitin bechagsa detoi. He says, but we know that Rav Yehuda told Rav Brona was able to sell wine, and Rav Gidol also was able to sell wheat on the marketplace festival. So how did that happen? So the answer is Shani Chag Sadatoy. The marketplace festival is different. Delo Kavia. That's not an established market fest. That's not a really established thing. So even though they had some sort of festival, I guess it wasn't really done on a particular day or time or whatever it was, that it was a specific Avodah Zara that people worshipped. Says the next Mishnah. Ir sheyesh ba avodos kachavim chutzala. If you've got a city that has avodos kachavim being worshipped outside of the city, mutter haya chutzala, then I'm sorry, read that wrong. Ir sheyesh ba avodos kachavim. If you have a city that has avodos kachavim, has idolatry in it, chutzala mutter, then it's permissible to do business outside the city.
How is it possible if you're supported, even though you're Jewish, even though it's out of the city?
It seems to be that the suburbs surrounding the city didn't necessarily have the same economy as the people in the city. So that's what their point is, right? Chutzala avodas kachavim tochala mutter. If the avodah zara is outside the city, then inside the city is permissible. Mahu lelech l'sham. What about walking to that city during the time that it's an Avodah Zarah fast time? If there's a street that only goes to that one city, so then it's prohibited to even walk on that route, because then everybody assumes you're going to the city in order to celebrate the holiday.
There's back alley to go around that area. Then
So but if you can go through that road to a different place, then it's permissible, right?
Through the back alley or something to avoid that one area.
Then you'd have to go correct, yes. Says the Gemara. What is the circumstance where you have something outside versus inside? Samar Shimon Levi. Shimon Levi says.
Shimon Lakish.
Sorry, Shimon Lakish. Sorry, I'm getting tired. Mishum Rechanina. Kegon Atluza Shel Aza. Like, for example, Atluza, which was a suburb surrounding Aza. Vigadamri Ba'mine Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish me Rabbi Chanina. Right, it's Rabbi Chanina.
Yep.
I got it right. Okay, good. See, not that tired. Atluza shel Aza mahu. What would be the halacha? Some say it was a question. What would be the halacha of Atluza around Aza? Amar le lo halachta. Sorry.
Atluza means a butcher.
I think Atluza is the name of a place, but I wonder if it was called that because it had meat markets outside of that was the meat markets of Aza. That's probably what it is.
But in Hebrew, Atluza is a butcher.
Yeah, so then that's right. So it's probably the meat markets of Aza,
Yes.
right? Let's see if anybody says that here. Yep.
You're right. Yes.
Yep.
There was a meat market in the village near close to the city.
There you go. A meat market. So it's a meat market. It's not a name of a town. It is the meat market of Aza. So he said, Amar le lo alachti l'tzur miyamecha v'ra'isa Yisrael v'ovid kochavim sheshaftu shtei kederos agabe kir achas. Have you never been to the city of Tzur, of Tyre? Now that is up north in Eretz Yisrael, and the Jews and the non-Jews live very peacefully and harmoniously together. And have you never seen that they put one stove together? The stove had two stove tops on it, and the Jew would put his pot on one side, and the non-Jew would put his non-kosher pot right next to it. So he says, so that's going to be the question. So you see that doesn't bother us. We're not worried about the trend. So therefore, the Chacham make have no worries about anything going on there, any mixture. So therefore, also you see that you can have Aza where they're worshiping Avodah Zara and the meat market next door, and you can work there, no problem. So now there's going to be three interpretations of the comparison. Okay, so my lo chashu lahem chachamim. What does it mean that the chacham didn't care? How are you connecting the two pots next to each other to a city in the suburb outside, or the market outside? Amar Rabbi says mishum baser nevela lo amrinon. What we mean is we're not worried that the non-Jew took non-kosher meat from his pot and put it into the Jew's pot.
Forbidden fat or water.
Not splash. We're not talking about splash. On purpose, a big chunk. We're going to talk about the splash would be the third answer. But let's talk about this first answer is we're not worried that the non-Jews can take a big piece of non-kosher meat just as a gag and throw it into the Jews' pots, right? Dilma mahadar ape Yisrael. Maybe a Jew will turn around for a moment, la'chorei, v'shadi ovei kachav nevela bekadrei, and then we won't worry that the non-Jew is going to throw his non-kosher meat into the pot, which is a Torah prohibition, right? You'd be eating treif, mamish, non-kosher, a Torah violation. Dekavase, hachanami lo chashu lahem chachamim. So therefore, we're also likewise, what he was saying is we're also not likewise worried about the potential Torah prohibition that might happen where you have a city where they're worshiping Avodah Zara and the market outside where they're not. Mishum demei avodas kachavim, because we have a Torah prohibition. We talked once before about how doing the business with the non-Jews, the problem is rabbinic, because they will praise their God if they do business with you. But if you actually take an item that was Avodah Zara, that was used to serve Avodah Zara, that is a Torah prohibition, right? So therefore, the first answer is, we're not concerned that since the city of Aza and the marketplace outside Aza are so close to each other that some non-Jew will actually use some money to serve Avodah Zara, then take that money outside to the market and spend the money in the markets. And therefore, the Jew will wind up with money that was used for Avodah Zara. We're not worried about that. That's the same thing as the two pots that are right next to each other. We're not worried that the non-Jew is going to take the non-kosher item and put it into the Jew's pot. That's answer number one. Rava's answer is, my lo chashu lahem chacham. And what does it mean that the chacham didn't worry about it? Mishum bishuli ovdei kochavim. We're not worried about, hey, maybe the fire goes out and the non-Jew lights the fire, and now we have a prohibition, a rabbinic prohibition against non-Jews cooking a Jew's food. Bishul akum. That's exactly right. That's a rabbinic prohibition. Our mashkichim are very much worried about those things, right? They live this every day, right? So first thing you do is first thing you got to do is turn the stove on for the non-Jew when he walks in, right? So
whatever it is.
we might be worried that if the non-Jew is cooking right next to the Jew, we'll worry about bishul akum, right? So dikavase. So we don't worry about bishul akum. We're not worried the non-Jews can take the pot off the fire and put it back on the fire, and therefore bishul akum. So hakinami lo chashlam chachamim mishum yom edom. So too, we're not worried about the rabbinic prohibition of helping the non-Jew, that the non-Jew might praise their God, because the non-Jew might be going back into the city and part of the Avodah Zara. We're not worried about that rabbinic prohibition either. That's the second answer. Rabbi Bar Ula Amar, Rabbi Bar Ula says, Amar lo choshu lahem chachamim mishum tzinura dekavasei. So he says, we're not worried about, and this is what Yehuda was, we're not splashing. We're not worrying about that the two pots are so close to each other that some bubbly splash will pop out of this pot and go into the other one. Because why? Because it's unlikely to happen, and even if it does, it's such a small amount that it's bottle, right? It's nullified.
Right,
So it doesn't really.
If you have it on high light, it keeps splash.
If it keeps happening, then it's more likely to happen, right? So, but this is saying it's unlikely to happen. So achinami lo chashalem chachamim mishum lifnei edehen. So too, we also were worried about the prohibitions that may come before their holidays, the prohibitions against serving. But we might be worried on their holiday, but before their holidays. And unlikely, it's a splash. It's similar to the splash over. It's unlikely that it's happening, so therefore we're not worried and not concerned about it. Okay, that is a good place for us to stop.